Just wanted to do another video on the Chris Eubank Nick Blackwell fight. I've done a video a few weeks ago on the channel, so if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. And I just touched on a few things regarding Chris Eubank's promotional situation with Matchroom and so on. But I wanted to do another video, a quick one today, because the press conference took place between Nick Blackwell and Chris Eubank, and I wanted to touch base on a few things, because I think with like the press conferences and things like gloves are off, you really get to see where both guys are at psychologically. And for me, a lot was revealed in the press conference. Now, I personally think that Nick Blackwell seemed very, very frustrated. I mean, he didn't shout, he didn't scream, he wasn't hollering, he wasn't being disrespectful, but you could really see that he just doesn't like Chris Eubank, and Chris Eubank winds him up. I think if you listen to it carefully, a lot of the questions that Nick Blackwell asked Chris Eubank Jr. responded in a very intelligent manner and seemed to kind of get one over on Nick Blackwell. And I'm not going to go too much into that, but if you watch the press conference, you'll see what I mean. And you can see that Nick Blackwell is really annoyed and upset with Chris Eubank Jr. It might not seem that way when you watch it, but I think he was just a lot more fidgety, and he seemed to get more frustrated at Chris Eubank's responses, which I thought were quite intelligent. Now, I think Nick Blackwell is a nice kid, don't get me wrong, and I think it's going to make for a really, really good fight. I mean, the main points that I wanted to focus on is the whole thing with Chris Eubank Jr. sparring with that guy and knocking him out, and posting it on social media. And Nick Blackwell and a few other people have shown that they're not very happy about that video being released, and they were saying it's a disrespect to the kid. And Nick Blackwell said, "I've knocked down people that have gone on to be world champions, and I didn't put it on my social media, and I think it's disrespectful and embarrassing for the guy in question, because he hadn't had any professional fights, and I think that it was disrespectful of you to put the video out." And to be honest with you, I kind of agree. It depends on what sort of a character you are. Chris Eubank's mentality is that he's a barbarian. He called himself a barbarian. So to me, he's got a fighter's mentality, and it just seemed like, in honesty, he didn't care whether the video was out or not and how the other fighter felt. He wants people to know that he can knock people out in sparring. Now, obviously, I mean, the guy hasn't had a professional fight before, so I'm not saying that it's good, or I'm not saying that it's impressive. I'm just saying that that's what Chris Eubank decided to say, and that's why I think he put the video out there. But Nick Blackwell certainly wasn't happy about it, and he made it known. And personally, I wouldn't do it if I was a boxer, and I was sparring a kid that is going to have a professional debut. I personally wouldn't post a video up of me punching him and knocking him down. So I can understand where Nick Blackwell is going at with that. But I think psychologically, the battle has been won by Eubank in the first press conference, and I think Nick Blackwell needs to kind of go into the fight and put all that to one side and stay focused. And I'm sure he is. I mean, Nick Blackwell isn't a bum. He's fought Martin Murray early on in his career. He fought Billy Joe Saunders. So he's had some really good, decent fights. Great stoppage against John Ryder. I think he needs to just, I'm sure he's very professional, but he just needs to put maybe the personal side of it, leave it to one side, and then let his talking be done in the ring. Now, Chris Eubank Sr. said, the reason why that video went out is so he can show other middleweights that Chris Eubank Jr. is coming for them. Now, I don't think it does that, because he didn't put someone like James DeGale down, or Carl Froch, or someone like that. It's just someone who's had his, who's about to have his professional debut. So, but for some reason, I think Chris Eubank turned it on its head and said, "Oh, this is just a message to all the middleweights out there that Chris Eubank means business." I don't know how it does that. Maybe they're trying to sort of water it down and make it not look so bad. But I mean, I think it was quite distasteful, and I'm a very big Eubank fan, and I also like Nick Blackwell, though, having said that. I think it's going to be very interesting. I mean, another thing that I picked up on Chris Eubank is the whole, Ronnie Davis. I mean, when we think back to the Chris Eubank fight with Billy Joe Saunders, he told Ronnie Davis to shut up. He referred to him as the man who's there to just apply his Vaseline. And today in the press conference, he was like, Ronnie Davis was like, there's nobody like Chris Eubank. He trains 6 days a week. And then Chris Eubank interrupted him. He's like, I train 7 days a week, Davies. And, I just think it looked a little bit belittling, if you want me to be honest. Now, this is a man that was with your father throughout his professional career. And he's an old guy, and don't get me wrong, behind the scenes, I'm sure they've got a great relationship. But I think in public, he kind of disrespected him a little bit. And I think Chris Eubank, he needs to give Ronnie Davis a break. This is like the third time he said something about him. And I think he should show a little bit of more respect to Ronnie Davis, in my opinion. And once again, I'm a Eubank fan. Going back to the fight in question, Chris Eubank, there was an argument between Nick Blackwell and Eubank about the previous spar, because they sparred in the past before, and Nick Blackwell was saying, I sparred you and you got out after 5 rounds and this and that. And, Chris Eubank was like, no, that's not what happened. There was a bit of bickering going on between the two there. So I think you should watch the press conference, because if you haven't done that already, because it's really quite interesting. It's quite funny. Now, in terms of Chris Eubank Jr. fighting for a British title, I was saying to myself, if you've got an opportunity to fight for a world title, why are you going for the British title? Why don't you fight for a world title? And obviously, they've come out and said, we represent Britain. Chris Eubank Jr. was like, I'm an ambassador for British boxing, and I think it's only fitting for me to, fight for the British title. And, that's why I've taken this fight. Whether or not, he doesn't think he's ready for world level, that's up to you to decide. Or maybe he genuinely feels that, he wants to win that belt. But it's not really his anyway. Even if he beats Nick Blackwell, he needs to fight 3 times and defend it 3 times before he can actually keep it, as far as my understanding goes. So he's not going to technically win it. So the question is, what happens when you do win the fight against Nick Blackwell? Are you going to fight British level opposition and keep it so you can retain it, or are you going to move on to world honors, or what's the next step for you? But in terms of the fight itself, I think you cannot sleep on Nick Blackwell. The thing about him is he doesn't have a very good amateur pedigree. He hasn't had that many amateur fights, but he came up the unlicensed route. Personally, when you do it that way, you have to be tough. And as Mick Hennessy said, he seems to have achieved a lot, coming out of the unlicensed game and into the professional sport, and to achieve what he's achieved by being British champion and fighting some world class fighters, as I say, like Martin Murray and Billy Joe Saunders. So you've got to respect him. And I actually think, and my opinion could change, it's always subject to change, that he has got really good stamina, and I think he's going to be on Chris Eubank all the time. And if you want me to be honest, a lot of people are saying that Chris Eubank is extremely fit. He's got great stamina, and he has. But I think but Nick Blackwell also has. And he's saying, I'm going to take you to places you've never been before. And that is a concern for me, actually, because, I don't think Nick Blackwell's going to beat Chris Eubank. But, I think Chris Eubank, he's there to be hit. And I think in the Spike O'Sullivan fight, and Nick Blackwell said it himself, and I agree with him, that he looked quite tired. He set a very, very fast pace at the beginning of the fight, and he looked tired. And I think that if Chris Eubank doesn't get Nick Blackwell out of there, and it goes to the later part of the fight, he could cause Chris Eubank a lot of problems. Because like I said, John Ryder is just as fit as Chris Eubank, and he's going to be on him constantly. Maybe Chris Eubank's too powerful for him. I think he's going to get a late stoppage. That's what I think is likely to happen, or he's going to win it on points. But do not sleep on Nick Blackwell. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. But I just wanted to kind of touch base on the whole, Chris Eubank Blackwell fight, the psychological aspect, because as I say, Chris Eubank, he really does look cool, calm and collected, and Nick Blackwell looks like he was really agitated by a lot of the things Chris Eubank said, and I think they became a little bit unstuck when Chris Eubank asked him, how many tickets have you sold? and Nick Blackwell was like, more than you, but you can see that, you know, he was getting annoyed, and Chris Eubank just seemed very, very cool, and again, supremely confident that he's going to win this fight. So I hope he's not underestimating Nick Blackwell, but I think it's going to be a cracking fight, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. If I were you, I'd watch the press conference if you haven't done so already, and let me know your thoughts in the section below, and don't forget to subscribe.